Years ago, Obian believed his legacy depended on sons. He rejected the daughters who loved him and trusted the sons who later betrayed him. But those same daughters forgave him, protected the family, and rebuilt his life from nothing. Now the village respects them. Their business is growing. Their home is finally peaceful. But far away, the two sons Obian once worshipped are watching. Their hearts are burning with revenge. And this time, they have joined hands with a powerful enemy. A man so greedy, he wants to destroy the daughters and take everything Obian owns. And what happens next will shake the entire village. The sun rose slowly over the village, spreading warm golden light across the mud houses and palm trees that surrounded Obian's compound. For the first time in many years, the air around the house carried peace instead of tension. Women passed along the dusty road with baskets balanced on their heads. Children laughed as they chased each other between the huts, and the smell of roasted maize drifted through the morning breeze. Inside the courtyard, Obian sat quietly on a wooden stool, watching his daughters move confidently around the compound as they prepared for another busy day of work. It still felt strange to him sometimes, seeing the same daughters he once called a curse, now standing as the pillars of his home. They spoke with traders, organized goods, and gave instructions with calm authority. Villagers who once mocked them now greeted them with respect whenever they passed through the market. Obian's heart carried a mixture of pride and regret. Pride because his daughters had become stronger and wiser than anyone in the village had expected, and regret because he had spent so many years blind to their value. Every time he looked at them, he remembered the broken hut behind the compound where he had once forced them to live. That memory followed him like a shadow he could never completely escape. Not far from him, Wangba stood beneath the shade of a mango tree, speaking with the eldest daughter about the day's work. Time had added silver threads to Wangba's hair, but her presence remained strong and steady, just as it had always been. The daughters listened carefully as they divided their responsibilities for the market, the storage house, and the trade caravans that had recently begun traveling to neighboring villages. Their small family business, once nothing more than a desperate attempt to survive, had grown into something remarkable. Traders from distant villages now visited their compound regularly, bringing fabrics, grains, and palm oil to exchange. Even the village elders often sought the daughters' advice when disputes arose in the market. A few steps away, soft laughter filled the courtyard as the eldest daughter gently rocked a small baby in her arms. The child, Obian's first grandchild, had been born only a few months earlier, and his presence had brought a new warmth into the family. Obian watched the baby with quiet amazement. Sometimes he would hold the child in his arms and wonder how life had turned so unexpectedly. The same man who once believed his name would only survive through sons was now finding joy in the laughter of a grandson born from the daughter he had once rejected. Life, it seemed, had its own way of teaching lessons that no one could escape. Yet, far beyond the peaceful village, in a dusty settlement near the edge of the forest road, two men sat outside a crumbling hut with bitterness burning in their hearts. Obian's sons had not forgotten the humiliation they had suffered when the village discovered their cruelty and selfishness. The respect they once enjoyed had vanished, replaced by whispers and ridicule wherever they went. Their clothes were worn, their pockets empty, and the pride they once carried had turned into a heavy weight of anger. Every conversation between them eventually returned to the same subject, their sisters. In their minds, the daughters were the reason everything had been taken from them. They could not accept the truth that their own greed had destroyed their reputation. Instead, they convinced themselves that the daughters had manipulated the village and stolen the future that rightfully belonged to them. As the sun set behind the trees, the older brother clenched his fists and stared into the fading light. "They live in comfort," he muttered bitterly, "while we sit here like strangers in our own land." The younger brother nodded slowly, his eyes dark with resentment. In that moment, both men felt the same burning thought forming inside their minds, the belief that their sisters must pay for the life they were now living. It was during one of those restless evenings that fate placed another man in their path, a man whose ambitions were even darker than their own. The stranger arrived with a small group of guards and a confident stride that immediately drew attention in the quiet settlement. He was known in nearby villages as Chief Daramola, a powerful leader whose wealth came from controlling trade routes and farmland across several communities. His robes were rich with embroidered patterns, and heavy coral beads rested proudly around his neck, symbols of authority and influence. But behind the polished appearance lived a mind that constantly searched for opportunities to expand his power. While resting at the settlement that evening, the chief heard whispers about Obian's growing business and the remarkable daughters who had turned a small family trade into something much larger. Curiosity quickly turned into interest, and interest soon grew into greed. When he learned that the two bitter men sitting near the fire were the sons of the same man whose daughters now controlled the trade, a slow smile spread across his face. The chief approached them calmly and listened as they poured out their frustration and anger. He did not interrupt. Instead, he watched them carefully, recognizing something useful in their resentment. By the time the conversation ended, the three men had already begun speaking about possibilities, about ways to take back what the sons believed belonged to them. And as darkness settled over the quiet settlement, a dangerous partnership quietly began to form, one that would soon send a shadow of trouble moving slowly toward the peaceful village Obian and his daughters had worked so hard to rebuild.
Night settled heavily over the dusty settlement where the three men sat around the small fire. The flames flickered against the rough walls of the hut, casting long shadows across their faces as Chief Daramola listened to Obian's sons describe the life their sisters were now living. They spoke with bitterness, their voices filled with resentment, explaining how the daughters had turned the village in their favor, how traders respected them, and how their father now stood proudly beside them as if the past had never happened. Daramola remained quiet for a long moment, slowly turning the carved head of his staff against the ground as he considered every word. Finally, he leaned forward, his sharp eyes glinting in the firelight. Power, he said calmly, does not belong to those who deserve it. It belongs to those who are bold enough to take it. The sons exchanged glances, sensing opportunity in the chief's voice. Daramola then began speaking about the trade routes that connected the villages, about how Obian's daughters had unknowingly built something valuable. Their small business was no longer just a family effort. It had become a gateway through which goods passed from one community to another. If someone controlled that trade, they would control wealth, influence, and loyalty from the surrounding villages. Slowly, the chief revealed his idea. He did not simply want to hurt the daughters. He wanted to take everything they had built and place it under his own authority. And with the sons guiding him, he believed it could be done. The plan began forming that very night. Daramola explained that a direct attack would only unite the village against them. Instead, he preferred something quieter, something that would weaken the daughters before anyone realized what was happening. Over the following days, he would send a few trusted men to visit nearby markets and whisper small doubts into the ears of traders. They would spread rumors that the daughters had secretly cheated merchants, that their business had grown too quickly to be honest, that their success came from manipulation rather than hard work. In villages where reputation meant everything, even a small rumor could poison trust. Meanwhile, the sons would secretly travel closer to Obian's village, observing the compound and learning the routines of the daughters' work. They would note when the storage houses were full, when the trade caravans arrived, and when the compound was quiet at night. Every detail would help them prepare the second part of the plan. As the chief spoke, the sons felt their anger slowly turning into excitement. For the first time since their disgrace, they felt powerful again, as if they were reclaiming the future they believed had been stolen from them. Back in Obian's village, life continued peacefully, unaware of the storm that was quietly gathering beyond the hills. The morning market remained busy, with traders arriving from distant places carrying baskets of dried fish, sacks of grain, and colorful fabrics woven from bright threads. Obian's daughters worked side by side, greeting merchants warmly and organizing the goods that flowed through their growing business. Their system had become efficient and respected. Villagers admired how the sisters shared responsibilities and made decisions together. The eldest daughter often stood at the center of the courtyard giving instructions, while another kept careful records of the trade, and others supervised the storage house where goods were kept safe before traveling to other markets. Wangba watched them with quiet pride, remembering the years when survival had seemed impossible. Even Obian himself had begun to feel a sense of calm he had never known before. Sometimes he would walk slowly through the village, hearing people praise the daughters he once rejected. Each compliment reminded him how much he had misjudged them. Yet beneath the peaceful routine, small changes were beginning to appear, changes that few people noticed at first. One afternoon, a trader who usually brought baskets of palm oil arrived looking unusually cautious. As he greeted the daughters, he hesitated before speaking, as if he were unsure how his words would be received. Finally, he cleared his throat and asked whether the rumors he had heard were true. The sisters exchanged confused looks. Rumors? What rumors? The trader explained that in a nearby village, some merchants had begun whispering that Obian's daughters had been taking unfair shares during exchanges. Another trader had heard a similar story earlier that morning. At first, the daughters laughed softly, dismissing the gossip as meaningless talk that often traveled between markets. But over the next few days, more traders arrived with the same uncertain expressions. Some of them still trusted the sisters completely, yet the questions kept returning. Where had the rumors started? Who had spread them? Slowly, an uneasy feeling began creeping into the compound. The daughters had worked too hard to build their reputation to ignore something that could damage it. The eldest daughter was the first to sense that the whispers were not random. One evening, as the sun sank behind the tall palm trees and painted the sky with deep orange light, she stood near the entrance of the compound watching the road that led into the village. Something about the rumors felt deliberate, as if someone was quietly testing the strength of their reputation. She turned to her sisters and spoke in a calm but serious voice. "This is not ordinary gossip. Someone is trying to weaken our name before doing something worse." The others listened carefully, realizing the truth in her words. They decided to watch more closely, to ask questions in the markets, and to pay attention to strangers moving through the area. What they did not yet know was that far away in the shadows of another village, Chief Daramola and Obian's sons were already preparing the next step of their plan, one far more dangerous than simple rumors, a move that would soon push the peaceful village towards a night none of them would ever know.
The uneasiness that had quietly settled over the compound did not disappear the next morning. Instead, it grew heavier, like the feeling that comes before a sudden storm. Traders still arrived, baskets still changed hands, and the village still carried on with its daily rhythm. Yet something invisible had shifted. The eldest daughter could see it in the hesitant smiles of a few merchants and in the way certain travelers asked too many careful questions. Standing near the entrance of the compound, she watched the dusty road as another caravan approached from the western hills. The men guiding the donkeys looked unfamiliar, their eyes scanning the compound with unusual curiosity. When they finally entered the courtyard, they greeted the family politely, but their words felt rehearsed, as though someone had already filled their minds with doubts. They asked about prices, about storage, about how long the daughters had been running the trade business. The questions themselves were harmless, but the tone behind them carried suspicion. The sisters answered calmly, refusing to show even the smallest hint of worry. Wangba stood beside them, her calm presence reminding everyone that this family had survived far worse storms than a few whispers in the marketplace. Yet when the traders finally left the compound, the eldest daughter felt a quiet certainty forming in her chest. Someone was working patiently behind the scenes, turning trust into uncertainty, one rumor at a time. That same evening, as the village slowly prepared for night, a stranger was seen walking along the outer path that circled the settlement. He carried himself like a traveler, dressed simply with a cloth bag slung across his shoulder. but his eyes studied every corner of the village as he moved. He paused near the market stalls, pretending to admire the remaining goods, and listened carefully to conversations between villagers. Later, he drifted closer to Obian's compound, stopping briefly beside a palm tree where he could observe the courtyard without being noticed. Inside, the daughters were finishing their work for the day. Clay lanterns were being lit, baskets were being stacked neatly against the storage walls, and the soft laughter of the baby echoed gently through the warm evening air. From his hiding place, the stranger watched everything: the number of people inside the compound, the way the gates were closed at night, even the path the daughters used when they walked toward the storage house. After several minutes, he slipped quietly back onto the road and disappeared into the darkness beyond the trees. Before sunrise the next morning, he would return to the settlement where Chief Daramola and the two bitter sons were waiting. And when he reported what he had seen, the chief's slow smile would reveal that the next step of the plan had already begun. Days passed, and the whispers in the market continued spreading like dry leaves carried by the wind. Some traders ignored them, but others grew cautious, delaying their business or reducing the amount of goods they exchanged with the daughters. The sisters worked twice as hard to keep the trust they had built over the years. They spoke openly with merchants, showed clear records of their trade, and welcomed anyone who wanted to see how their system worked. Most villagers admired their honesty, yet the rumors had done exactly what they were meant to do. They had planted small seeds of doubt that slowly weakened confidence. One afternoon, as Obian walked slowly through the market square, he overheard two strangers discussing the daughter's business in low voices. One of them suggested that the family had become too powerful, that no single household should control so much trade in the village. The words struck Obian like a sudden chill. For the first time, he sensed the danger hiding beneath the rumors. Whoever had started them was not simply trying to embarrass the family. They were preparing the village to believe something much worse. Far beyond the village, beneath the shade of tall forest trees, Chief Daramola listened with satisfaction as his messenger described the compound in detail. The sons stood beside him, their faces tense with anticipation as the chief slowly tapped his staff against the ground. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had predicted. The rumors had begun to weaken trust, and the messenger had confirmed that the daughter's success relied heavily on the storage house where goods were kept before traveling to other markets. After a moment of thoughtful silence, the chief finally spoke. His voice was calm, but the words carried a dangerous certainty. Tonight, we begin the real work. The sons leaned closer, their eyes bright with excitement and revenge. Daramola explained that if the storage house were destroyed, or if the goods inside suddenly disappeared, the daughter's reputation would collapse overnight. Traders would believe the rumors immediately, assuming the family had been hiding something dishonest all along. In the confusion that followed, Daramola would step forward with a generous offer to restore order to the trade routes, placing the entire business under his control. The sons listened carefully as the plan unfolded before them, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anger and triumph. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly across the evening sky, and though the village remained peaceful for the moment, a dangerous night was already moving silently toward Obian's compound. The night had grown heavy, almost pressing down on the compound with its stillness. Only the soft flicker of lanterns illuminated the daughters as they moved quietly through the courtyard, checking the storage house one last time before the evening meal. Outside, the wind carried the faint rustle of leaves, masking the soft crunch of footsteps approaching from the shadows. The eldest daughter paused, instinctively sensing something was off. Her eyes scanned the outer walls, and though the moon was high, the darkness beyond the courtyard seemed unusually thick, almost deliberate. She whispered to her sisters, "Stay close and keep calm. Something is coming and we must be ready." They huddled together, each one gripping a small wooden staff carved long ago for self-defense, their hearts racing, yet their faces calm and determined. Wangba, sitting nearby with the youngest grandchildren in her lap, noticed the tension. She didn't need to be told what was happening.
Years of patience and endurance had sharpened her instincts. "Do not fear them," she said softly. "They only think they have power. Remember, we have something they cannot take: our unity, our discipline, and our courage." Even as the words left her lips, the shadows grew darker, and the sound of stealthy movement along the walls became clearer. This was no ordinary night. It was a night that would test everything the family had built, every lesson the daughters had learned, and every ounce of resilience Wangba had nurtured in them. The first sign of the danger came as a soft crash against one of the storage house windows. Glass splintered quietly, yet its sound was sharp enough to slice through the stillness of the night. The daughters moved quickly, not panicking, but reacting with precision. The eldest positioned herself near the door, listening. Through the shadows, she could make out two figures attempting to force the window open. The sons, finally revealing themselves as participants in the long-planned attack, were not alone. Beside them stood a tall man dressed in dark robes with a commanding presence, Chief Daramola, whose greed and cunning had finally manifested in physical form. The daughters exchanged a quick glance, each reading the determination and fearlessness in the other's eyes. They had been trained for moments like this, not by chance, but through years of discipline, observation, and the guiding hands of Wangba. The younger daughters, though still teenagers, were instructed to move quietly to safety, while the older ones prepared to confront the intruders. The night air vibrated with tension, each heartbeat echoing like a drumbeat warning of the coming clash. The men at the window did not notice that the daughters had positioned themselves strategically, using shadows and the layout on the compound to their advantage. The eldest daughter stepped forward, voice steady, carrying the authority of someone who had learned to lead through wisdom, not fear. "Leave now or face the consequences," she commanded, her voice cutting through the night with clarity. Silence followed, the tension so thick that even the faint whistle of wind seemed to pause, awaiting the intruder's response. Daramola, sensing a challenge, smiled faintly and gestured to the sons to proceed. What followed was a chaotic flurry of movement, yet controlled on the daughter's side. They had anticipated every likely approach, every strategy the greedy chief and their reckless brothers might attempt. The sons lunged first, their arrogance blinding them to the daughter's preparation. But each strike they attempted was met with a precise counter. The eldest daughter moved with a calm ferocity, intercepting a blow from her older brother, forcing him back with a controlled push. Another sister flanked the other son, disarming him of a wooden staff and holding him at bay without inflicting unnecessary harm. Meanwhile, Daramola attempted to breach the storage house door, but he was met by a sudden and coordinated defense, as if the daughters themselves were extensions of one another's will. Wangba, from the edge of the compound, guided them quietly, reminding them where to focus, where the threat was greatest, and when to hold their ground. The night seemed alive with every movement, a dance of shadow and light, determination against greed, discipline against chaos. The sons, enraged at being resisted, yelled accusations and threats, but their voices were hollow. They lacked the training, the foresight, and the unity that had allowed the daughters to survive, thrive, and build a life that could not be toppled by sheer force or malicious intent. Each daughter moved as though they had known this moment their entire lives, using strategy, speed, and precision to counter their father's misguided heirs and the dangerous chief. The clash echoed through the compound, but the daughters' control over their fear ensured that chaos never became defeat. Even the youngest, hiding near the back of the courtyard, clutched the baby, eyes wide but still silent, understanding through instinct that their family's survival depended on calm, discipline, and courage. By the time the first light of dawn began to touch the village, the intruders were forced to retreat. The sons, bruised, humiliated, and confused, stumbled back toward the outer road, realizing that their father's family, whom they had long dismissed, was far more formidable than they had ever imagined. Chief Daramola, with his plans unraveling before him, retreated into the shadows with a promise that this was not over. Yet, even in retreat, the daughters held their stance, ensuring that no harm had come to Wangba, the younger children, or the storage house. They had not only defended their property, but also their dignity, their unity, and the years of careful work they had poured into the family. Wangba, stepping into the courtyard, felt a quiet pride swell within her chest. Her daughters had faced the culmination of greed, recklessness, and betrayal, and had emerged stronger. She embraced the elders who still held the stance of a guardian, even as exhaustion weighed on her shoulders. The younger sisters followed, and together the family shared a quiet moment of triumph, their bond reaffirmed. Though the sons and their powerful ally had sought to bring chaos, they had underestimated the unshakable foundation of discipline, love, and courage that Wangba had instilled over decades. The village, waking to the aftermath, whispered once more, not of shame, but of awe and respect for the daughters who had defended their family with precision and honor. In the days that followed, life within the compound returned to a careful rhythm. The daughters repaired minor damages, reinforced weak spots in the storage house, and began planning for future security measures to ensure no one could breach their domain again. Wangba, though older and with lines of experience etched across her face, remained the steady guide, her voice gentle but firm. She reminded her daughters that strength was not only in physical skill, but also in vigilance, wisdom, and unity. Slowly, the sons, now humbled and wary, began to understand the gravity of their failures, though they still wrestled with jealousy and frustration. They had witnessed the undeniable power of discipline and preparation, and though their hearts burned with resentment, a small seed of respect, however reluctant, had taken root. Daramola, from a distance, fumed over the failed plan, realizing that greed alone could not overcome a family forged by years of wisdom, patience, and resilience. The stage was set for the next chapter in the village's ongoing story, one where challenges would continue to rise, enemies would seek new avenues of attack, but the daughters, led by experience and courage, would face them together, unbowed and undefeated. The compound stood as a symbol, bright under the sun, a testament to survival, strategy, and the unbreakable bond of a family who had learned that unity could withstand any storm.